On January 1971, this family moved to a house on 1677 Round Top Road in Burrillville, Rhode Island. Rhode Island is one of the smallest states in America. For Caroline and Roger, this is the perfect place to raise their 5 daughters. Because the house they got had 14 bedrooms. When the housekeeper gave them the key, he told them to turn on the lights at night, for the sake of their children's well-being. At first, they did not understand what that man meant. They thought that the husband was just reminding them of that. Because in those years, there were a lot of serial killers in the U.S. What they did not know, the things they will experience in that house and their children, will be the inspiration of one of the most famous horror movies released in 2013. The Conjuring. That movie is about the real life of the Perron family. As expected, a lot has been changed, added, and reduced to make the movie even scarier. But when the Perron family watched it, they said their experiences are even scarier than what happened in the movie. Because the house they moved to in 1971 was built more than 200 years ago. That year, 1736. It is said that 7 generations of the family lived in that house. The only problem is that some of them never left. If you like this kind of content, horror stories, mystery, solved and unsolved cases, paranormal, demons, please like this video and don't forget to subscribe. Let's start the story. The Perron family bought the house in Rhode Island in mid-1970, but they moved here in 1971. When Roger and Carolyn Perron first entered that house, they felt like they built that house for their family. Although they don't know the history of the house, they were accompanied by their 5 daughters: April, Cindy, Christine, Nancy, and their eldest sister, Andrea. They were not good at arranging their things that day. Because apart from having a lot of things, the children were running around. They immediately went around every corner of the house and taught them where to sleep. There is a scenario that day that struck Roger and Carolyn. Before they were given the key to Mr. Kenyon's house, the last person who lived in the house, they reminded them to turn on the lights in the house at night. It is said that they were lucky to have 5 daughters. At first, they didn't pay much attention to this, because there were a lot of crimes happening in America that year. Carolyn, Roger, and their 5 daughters began to notice strange things happening almost immediately after they moved in. It started small. Carolyn would notice that the broom went missing, or seemed to move from place to place on its own. She would hear the sound of something scraping against the kettle in the kitchen when no one was in there. She'd find small piles of dirt in the center of a newly cleaned kitchen floor. The girls began to notice spirits around the house. Though for the most part, they were harmless, there were a few, however, that were angry. Carolyn alleged allegedly researched the history of the home and discovered had been in the same family for 8 generations, and that many of them had died under mysterious or horrible circumstances. Several of the children had drowned in a nearby creek. One was murdered, and a few of them hanged themselves in the attic. The spirit that was depicted in the film, Bathsheba, was the worst of them all. Whoever the spirit was, she perceived herself to be mistress of the house, and she resented the competition the mother posed for that position. It turns out there was actually a real person named Bathsheba Sherman who lived on the Perron's property in the mid-1800s. She was rumored to have been a Satanist, and there was evidence that she had been involved in the death of a neighbor's child, though no trial ever took place. She was buried in a nearby Baptist cemetery in downtown Harrisville. The parents believed that it was Bathsheba's spirit that was tormenting them, and would cause beds to rise off the floor. The father would enter the basement and feel a cold, stinking presence behind him, as well that smelled like rotting flesh. They often stayed away from the dirt-floored cellar. The family experienced other spirits. Over the 10 years that the family lived in the house, the Warrens made multiple trips to investigate. Edward Warren and Lorraine Rita Warren were American paranormal investigators and authors associated with prominent cases of alleged hauntings. Edward was a self-taught and self-professed demonologist, author, and lecturer. Lorraine professed to be clairvoyant and a litrance medium who worked closely with her husband. Ed Warren died in Monroe, Connecticut, at the age of 79. Lorraine Warren died on April 19, 2019, at the age of 92. At one point, Lorraine conducted a seance to
It's 9:18. We're headed down into the cellar where the doors just opened on its own. Give us a sign that you want to communicate with us.
Nothing.
to contact the spirits that were possessing the family. During the seance, Perron became possessed, speaking in tongues and rising from the ground in her chair. Andrea claims to have secretly witnessed the seance. My mother began to speak a language not of this world in a voice not her own. Her chair levitated and she was thrown across the room. After the seance, Roger kicked the Warrens out, worried about his wife's mental stability. The family continued to live in the house due to financial instability, until they were able to move in 1980. At which point the spirits were silenced, and the haunting ceased.